Book TV continues. George Michael reports on speculations of extraterrestrial life and UFO sightings.
Okay, good evening. My name is George Michael. I'm an associate professor here at Westfield State University. Before I begin, I want to thank Mr. Mike Zombek, Ms. Laura Fellon, and Ms. Molly Watson for their help in organizing my lecture this evening. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out here this evening. Tonight, I'm going to talk about a book I wrote called Preparing for Contact. Here's a rough outline of my lecture. My book investigates the prospect of extraterrestrial life from a variety of perspectives, including astronomy and astrobiology. I'll speculate on what forms alien civilizations might take. Next, I'll discuss the SETI effort. SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is a scientific effort to detect radio transmissions from alien civilizations. I'll also speculate on the potential consequences of contact, both indirect and direct, with alien civilizations. And I'll discuss the more controversial UFO data as well. After that, I'll talk about the prospects of humans exploring the cosmos and initiating first contact. And finally, I'll discuss some of the perils that our civilization will have to surmount in order to survive and someday make contact with aliens and perhaps colonize the galaxy. Now, for centuries, our ancestors wondered if we were alone in the universe. For instance, as far back as 400 BC, the Greek philosopher Democritus theorized that all matter consisted of differing combinations of atoms. If other celestial bodies were composed of the same elements that were found on Earth, then it was not unreasonable to assume that life could inhabit them as well. Nevertheless, for centuries, considered opinion accepted the centrality of Earth and the universe, as exemplified by Aristotle. According to this view, the universe was created by some supreme being and governed by design. And this idea was reinforced in the 2nd century AD when Ptolemy posited that the Earth was the center of the universe. And these models dovetailed with the Christian theology, which viewed Earth and man as distinct in God's scheme. But in the early 16th century, Nicholas Copernicus boldly asserted that the Earth revolved around the sun and was not the center of the universe. In doing so, he transformed the Earth into just another planet, which in turn suggested that other planets may have Earth-like characteristics as well, perhaps even hosting life. And in 1609, Galileo became the first person to use the new invention of the telescope for the purpose of astronomy. And so the telescope led to new discoveries that really informed the extraterrestrial life debate, for it revealed that the size of the universe was much larger than what earlier observers assumed it to be. So by the end of the 17th century, the tide of informed opinion shifted toward the plurality of worlds doctrine, which increasingly became rooted in science rather than theology. Another important contribution was evolutionary theory, which was popularized by Charles Darwin in the middle of the 19th century with his book, The Origins of the Species. And although he did not mention the topic of alien life, his research really presented scientists with a powerful theory for the extraterrestrial life debate. New advances in astronomy would bolster the plurality of worlds doctrine and, by extension, the prospects for the existence of life beyond our solar system. For example, in the year 1814, Joseph von Fraunhofer invented the spectroscope. And through this method, astronomers were able to determine the chemical composition of stars. And so spectroscopy provides the clearest evidence for the chemical homogeneity of the universe. This implies that the laws governing chemical reactions on Earth also apply throughout the cosmos. With more powerful telescopes, astronomers could make better observations of the planets, including Mars. Interestingly, around the turn of the 20th century, Some astronomers, including Giovanni Schiaparelli and Percival Lowell, believed that they had actually discerned canals on the red planet. Eventually, though, astronomers came forward to debunk their theories. Now, for centuries, our view of the cosmos was obscured by the presence of the atmosphere. But in the early 1990s, the Hubble Space Telescope began producing startling images of the cosmos from space. And primary among them are images of exoplanets, or planets that reside outside of our solar system. As of April of 2015, roughly 1,900 exoplanets have been confirmed. And in recent months, some Earth-like planets have been detected as well. And so by inference, these findings bolster the case for life existing outside of our solar system. Astrobiology can be defined as the study of the origins, evolution, and distribution of life in the universe. If the right elements are available under the right environmental conditions, then the assumption is that life has a good chance of emerging. Among the most important elements for the creation of life is carbon. Carbon has many qualities that make it an excellent compound for life. When looking for signs of alien life, astrobiologists use what's known as a follow-the-water strategy. Water has unique characteristics that make it an ideal medium in which life can evolve. But water, in and of itself, does not guarantee the emergence of life. Oxygen appears vital to the development of complex life. Now, for most of Earth's history, oxygen levels remain very low in the atmosphere. And that might have postponed the emergence of advanced animal life. The rise of oxygen content may have ignited the Cambrian explosion, that is to say, the relatively rapid emergence around 542 million years ago of a multitude of major animal organisms on Earth. Complex life forms began populating the planet. Now, the complexity of DNA has led some scientists to wonder if it was designed by some agency outside of the Earth. Francis Crick, the Nobel laureate and also the co-discoverer of DNA, he actually thought this was possible. In 1973, he and Leslie Orgel wrote an article in which they speculated that aliens may have seeded planets in the universe by sending probes out into space in a process called directed panspermia as a way in which to spread the building blocks of life. This idea was captured in the popular 2012 film Prometheus. But even if intelligent life has emerged outside of Earth, its form could be radically different than humans. That said, proponents of convergent evolution argue that there is actually a good possibility that intelligent alien life will assume humanoid form. Similar environments, so the theory goes, will produce similar adaptations, even in unrelated organisms. And so as a consequence, aliens might end up looking a lot like us. Now, as exoplanets are discovered at the rate of about 1 or 2 a week, scientists now assume that exoplanets are plentiful in the universe. Therefore, it's not unreasonable to speculate that advanced alien civilizations could exist beyond Earth. So what really makes the notion of extraterrestrial life exciting is the prospect that there could be intelligent alien beings not unlike humans. The example of life on Earth illustrates the increasing complexity of life over time. Since life has formed on Earth, it has undergone a steady progression in the direction of larger biological and social entities. Single cells eventually conglomerated to form multicellular organisms. There was a biological division of labor that led to the creation of more complex organisms with organs. Finally, Homo sapiens originated in sub-Saharan Africa around 200,000 years ago. And at first, humans congregated into families, and later groups. Tribes were formed and were followed by larger and larger communities. Nations brought more people together, and by the 20th century, supranational organizations, such as the United Nations, loomed larger and larger in international politics. But even if a civilization does emerge it might not develop the technology that would enable it to communicate with other intelligent beings in the universe. So in order to create advanced technology, science must be practiced. Isaac Asimov once argued that the ability to use fire is what really distinguished humans from other animals. So in large part, energy extraction determines the level of sophistication of a technological civilization. On that note, back in 1964, a Russian astrophysicist by the name of Nikolai Kardashev, he proposed a classification of alien civilizations based on their methods of energy extraction. His scale has 3 categories. First, a Type 1 civilization can harness all available energy sources on its planet. A Type 2 civilization harnesses energy directly from the star in its solar system, not merely using solar power, but the direct mining of energy from that star. Finally, a Type 3 civilization is able to harness the power of other stars in its galaxy. Now, currently, our civilization occupies a position that has not quite attained Type 1 status. Back in the early 1970s, Carl Sagan once classified Earth as 0.7 on the Kardashev scale. So to survive for a long time, a civilization would require tremendous advances in science and technology. In that vein, about 10 years ago, Ray Kurzweil, a noted inventor, predicted that by the year 2045, we will reach the singularity. The singularity is heralded as an era in which humans will transcend their biological bodies and begin to meld with computers. So according to Kurzweil, this transition will be the next step, the natural step in evolution. Based on this line of reasoning, it's conceivable that alien intelligence may have long since transitioned to some form of post-biological life. So if intelligent beings emerge elsewhere in the cosmos, it's likely that they would be interested in communicating with intelligence outside of their planets. And with that assumption, the SETI enterprise looks for evidence of advanced life in the cosmos. People have long thought about the prospect of aliens, but it was really not until around the middle of the last century that a viable methodology of detecting alien intelligence was put forward. In 1959, Giuseppe Cocconi and Philip Morrison published an article in which they called for searching for radio signals as a method to detect extraterrestrial intelligence. They argued that radio seemed to be the logical medium which aliens would use to attempt to make contact with other civilizations. The next year, Frank Drake initiated something called Project Ozma. It used a radio telescope in West Virginia to search for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. He also created the so-called Drake equation. That's basically a formula designed to estimate the number of communicating civilizations in the galaxy. So SETI uses a variety of methods to scan the galaxy for evidence of civilizations on other planets. Furthermore, according to the second law of thermodynamics, an advanced civilization would generate large quantities of waste heat. And this might be able to be detected on our instruments. But to date, no telltale signs have yet to be detected. There are occasional claims, for example, such as the face on Mars, but nothing that is generally accepted as hard evidence. Now, to create an institutional basis for the search for alien intelligence, the SETI Institute was founded in 1984 in order to seek private funding for a targeted search. What would be the implications if we someday receive a message from an alien civilization? Now, despite Hollywood's portrayal of hostile invasions, historic anecdotes suggest that the general public is generally optimistic about the existence of alien civilizations. Rather than being fearful, most people tend to be excited about the proposition. Albert Harrison, a SETI scientist, he noted several precedents when a sizable portion of the population believed that the existence of aliens had been verified. For example, many people were intrigued by the accounts of canals on Mars, as detailed by people like Percival Lowell. What effect would the receipt of an alien message have on organized religions here on Earth? Some observers opine that if contact is ever made, religions on Earth will no longer be able to go back as business as usual. Some people on Earth might even create kind of a cargo cult in which they deify the aliens. Now, the issue of contact raises an important question. Who should speak for Earth, and what should be said if contact is ever established? So in 2001, based on that premise, the 2001 SETI Institute established something known as the Post-Detection Group. Its mission is to prepare for the day when contact with alien intelligence is confirmed. And so to that end, an international group of SETI scientists established a protocol for how to respond in this particular event. Now, to SETI enthusiasts, the receipt of an alien message would be the most important event in human history, for it will prove that we are not alone in the cosmos. If a civilization can surmount its problems, presumably its technology will continue to advance, in which case interstellar travel could someday be possible. Working off of that assumption, some researchers assert that aliens might have already visited our planet. Now, anomalous sightings in the sky date back to early recorded history. Historically, witnesses have identified unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, in a manner that was reflective of their eras. So according to the ancient alien hypothesis, if we replace sky gods with advanced technocrats, then the ancient texts appear more plausible. So over the years, numerous researchers have advanced this hypothesis, but it really came into fruition in the 20th century. For example, in the early 1930s, a Russian scientist by the name of Nikolai Rynin, he discussed theories of spaceflight along with an analysis of ancient Greek and Hindu legends regarding air and spaceships. Arguably, no other person has done more to popularize the ancient alien theory than the Swiss author Erich von Däniken. His book, Chariots of the Gods, became an international bestseller in the 1970s. Now, according to his thesis, aliens have had a long-standing relationship with humans and influenced a number of ancient cultures. The evidence he adduced is circumstantial, consisting in large part of the surviving edifices of ancient civilizations. The most prolific author in this regard of the ancient astronaut theory was Zecharia Sitchin. For his analysis, he focused on the civilization of Sumer. In a highly controversial thesis, he asserted that the flowering of Sumerian civilization was occasioned by some outside agency. In his first book, The 12th Planet, he advanced the theory that the Sumerian text detailed the story of how aliens colonized the Earth more than 400,000 years ago. So the ancient alien theory has gained currency in the popular culture, but to date, the theory has not found acceptance in the scientific community. Likewise, skeptics reject claims of extraterrestrial origins for contemporary UFOs as well. Be that as it may, a number of seemingly credible eyewitnesses have reported aerial anomalies suggesting an extraterrestrial origin. The contemporary UFO era commenced on June 24, 1947. A pilot by the name of Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 shiny objects flying past Mount Rainier Plateau in Washington State. Not long thereafter, the U.S. military had several encounters with UFOs. For instance, on January 7th, 1948, an Air Force captain by the name of Thomas Mantell, he pursued what he described as a metallic object high in the sky. After giving chase, his plane crashed into the ground and he died. Perhaps the most notable reported military case involving a UFO occurred in December 1980 at the Rendlesham Forest in England. Several U.S. Air Force security police officers reported observing a UFO. They described the object as shiny and shaped like a cone, about 5 to 6 feet in height. The craft landed, and one member of the patrol, Sergeant James Peniston, even touched the object. 2 nights after the initial sighting, the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, he observed an anomalous craft as well. According to his account, the object zigzagged through the sky when suddenly exploded into 5 bright white lights and then disappeared. Numerous civilian accounts of UFOs have surfaced over the years as well. For instance, there was the Hudson Valley wave, which began in upstate New York and parts of Connecticut around 1982. Numerous people saw large V-shaped objects in the sky hovering at low altitudes. Even more intriguing was the case of the Phoenix Lights. That included a number of spectacular sightings that were reported in Arizona in March of 1997. Now, the consensus among researchers is that 95% of the UFO sightings can be explained by earthly sources. The other 5%, however, cannot be attributed to secret military exercises or natural phenomena. Although many scientists remain very skeptical about UFOs, at one time the U.S. government took the topic quite seriously. Around the onset of the Cold War, the U.S. government began to take a keen interest in UFOs. The initial concern was that these anomalous flying objects could be Soviet in origin. So in late December of 1947, the Pentagon gave an order to commence an official study of UFOs, and the next month, Project Sign was launched. So Project Sign examined numerous sightings and issued an official report which actually favored the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Soon thereafter, Project Sign was officially terminated, but new programs were launched, the most important of which was the Air Force's Project Blue Book. It began in 1951. Initially, Captain Edward Ruppelt led that project. Also in 1953, the CIA formed an advisory panel to evaluate the potential threats related to UFOs. It was nicknamed the Robertson Panel after Howard Robertson, who served as the chairman of that committee. At the time, the CIA was concerned that public interest could possibly threaten national security. In the event of a spurious UFO wave, communications channels could be clogged, which could make the country vulnerable to a Soviet attack. So the CIA encouraged all agencies within the intelligence community to work with the media for the purpose of debunking UFOs. By doing so, it was hoped that public interest in the topic would diminish. But despite these efforts, the UFO issue would not go away. From around 1965 to 1969, at least a few scientists began to take the subject of UFOs seriously, in part because of pressure from Congress. As a result, the Air Force agreed to initiate an extensive study of UFOs. It would be conducted by a major university, in this case, the University of Colorado. Edward Condon, a prominent physicist at the time, he agreed to lead the effort. So finally released in early 1969, the Condon report concluded that there was no real substance to the UFO issue. UFOs, according to their estimation, did not present any kind of peril to U.S. national security. And so the Air Force really wanted out of the UFO business, and it used the Condon report as its excuse to terminate Project Blue Book. And that, in effect, ended all official investigations into the topic of UFOs. And so as a consequence, the UFO question shifted to the margins. Scientists refused to take the issue seriously. So the Condon report was a major setback to ufology. But over time, some skeptics reversed their position on UFOs. Most notable was J. Allen Hynek. He once served as a scientific advisor for Project Blue Book. Over time, he became more amenable to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And in 1973, he founded the Center for UFO Studies, which is currently based in Illinois. It's worth mentioning that some government officials have taken UFOs seriously and even attempted to get to the bottom of the issue. For example, former President Jimmy Carter He once stated that in 1969, he and a group of businessmen spotted a UFO while attending a Lions Club meeting in Georgia. Ronald Reagan wrote that he had witnessed at least 2 UFO sightings. And while president, he occasionally speculated about the prospect of aliens and their impact if they ever visited the Earth. More recently, John Podesta, who served in both the Clinton and Obama administrations, has publicly supported efforts to bring more information on the topic of UFOs. Now, ostensibly, today the U.S. government appears to be aloof of UFOs. For example, in 2012, the Federal Aviation Administration stated that persons who wish to report UFO sightings should contact the Advanced Space Studies Division of Bigelow Aerospace. That firm was founded by Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow has an abiding interest in UFOs, although he usually doesn't talk too much about it. Now, even more incredible than the UFO sightings are the reports of direct contact with alien beings. Now, to be sure, some claims strain credulity and seem patently false. For instance, in 1952, George Adamski, he regaled people with stories that he encountered an alien from the planet Venus. But subsequent probes of Venus indicated that the planet is inhospitable to life, thus belying his fantastic claims. Other accounts, however, cannot be dismissed so easily. One of the more convincing abduction cases involved a married couple, Betty and Barney Hill. Their story began outside of Portsmouth, New Hampshire in September 1961. They were driving home late at night from a vacation. They noticed a bright light in the sky. And for years, their ordeal was suppressed. But under the treatment of a Boston psychiatrist, the Hills recounted amazing stories of their experiences while under hypnosis. For instance, they recalled being taken on board a spacecraft and placed in separate rooms, whereupon they were subjected to physical examinations. One of the most celebrated abduction stories comes from Whitley Strieber's 1987 book, Communion. He claimed to have had a number of personal encounters with non-human entities over the course of his life. The late John E. Mack, he was a professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. He conducted the most extensive research on alien abduction cases. Now, initially, he was very skeptical, but over time, he concluded that the vast majority of his subjects were psychologically healthy people that were coping with extraordinary experiences. So what accounts for the alien abduction phenomenon? Are extraterrestrials really responsible? Some researchers have conjectured that aliens could originate from alternative dimensions rather than from distant planets. And as incredible as this might sound, some researchers have speculated that the hallucinogenic drug DMT could be used as a possible gateway to make contact with alien entities. A physician, Dr. Rick Strassman in New Mexico, he conducted a government-sanctioned study of DMT, and to his amazement, he found that almost 50% of his subjects reported encounters with bizarre figures that they perceived as residing in different dimensions. Strassman found striking commonalities between the reports of John Mack's subjects and those of his DMT volunteers. Now, collectively, the abductees' claims are far from convincing, but if UFOs are indeed extraterrestrial in origin, it stands to reason that alien visitors would occasionally interact with humans. And according to some researchers, there is already much evidence to support that proposition, but it's supposed to be suppressed by the U.S. government. Many people believe that the U.S. government is holding back on its knowledge of UFOs. The critical nature of extraterrestrial visitation, so the argument goes, is too sensitive for the government to release to the public. The most celebrated conspiracy theory is the Roswell story. It began in July of 1947 when Mac Brazel discovered some unique debris on the ranch where he worked. He reported his discovery to the local sheriff's office in Roswell, and the sheriff contacted Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer at the nearby Roswell Army Airfield. Shortly thereafter, the base commander announced through his office that his unit had captured a crashed flying saucer at the ranch outside of Roswell. Accompanying the press release was a photo showing some of the pieces of the alleged saucer. But the next day, Roger B. Ramey of the 8th Air Force, he announced on local radio that the original report had been a mistake. He retracted the initial claim and now maintained that the wreckage was from a high-altitude weather device and not an alien spacecraft. The story quickly faded into obscurity and was all but forgotten. But in 1978, Jesse Marcel broke his silence. In his estimation, the debris recovered at the site was no weather balloon, but rather something that was not of this earth. So soon after Marcel's revelations, the story really began to crack open. Numerous witnesses came forward and corroborated the crashed saucer version of the Roswell incident. Now, in the 1990s, the UFO community sought to generate congressional interest in the Roswell incident. And a congressman from New Mexico by the name of Stephen Schiff, he worked hard to get answers for his constituents and others about what exactly happened at Roswell. And so the Air Force released 2 publications which categorically denied that a flying saucer or alien bodies were recovered at the site. The reports did concede, however, that a highly classified operation named Project Mogul could have led some witnesses to misidentify the remnants of a weather balloon for a crashed saucer. Project Mogul was a mission to detect hydrogen bomb tests from afar using balloons. Now, with all that has been written about the topic, readers are caught in a conundrum. So far, there is a dearth of documentary and physical evidence put forward to really make a convincing case that a flying saucer crashed in New Mexico. However, there is a wealth of testimony from key figures involved in the incident. Moreover, there is a remarkable consistency in these accounts, which lends to their credibility. Adding grist to the Roswell conspiracy mill is the story of MJ-12, or the Majestic 12 group. This story first broke in 1987. MJ-12 refers to an alleged body of 12 high-ranking government officials who were part of a secret committee that knew the alleged truth about UFOs and aliens. Now, for years, the MJ-12 story lacked credibility because of a lack of corroborating evidence. Because all of the alleged members were dead, they could not comment on their affairs. But finally, in 1997, a government insider, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, he came forward to substantiate the story. He wrote a book the day after Roswell, and in it he maintained that the prerequisites of modern technologies, including lasers, fiber optics, and even transistors, were all reverse engineered from the debris that was recovered at the crash site near Roswell. Now, not surprisingly, relations between the UFO and SETI communities are cold. Skeptics like the SETI scientist Seth Shostak find it unlikely that virtually all governments of the world could conspire to hide the truth about UFOs. As he notes, instead of landing on the White House lawn, aliens have a penchant for appearing to farmers and stranded motorists. For his part, the noted UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, he counters that negotiations usually occur between groups with roughly the same level of power. And because we would not be their technological equals, aliens would feel no compelling reason to land on the White House lawn to meet with the president. So even if alien life exists elsewhere in the galaxy, some scientists believe that they would never have any way of making direct physical contact with Earth. The laws of physics, as we currently conceive them, would seem to rule out the prospect of interstellar travel. But perhaps for a civilization that is millions of years more technologically advanced than ours, this could be well within the realm of possibility. As such, it behooves us to consider the consequences of direct contact. Back in 2010, the eminent British astrophysicist Stephen Hawking He warned that communicating with alien civilizations could be potentially dangerous. Presumably, any civilization that could send a spacecraft across interstellar distances would be far more technologically advanced than we are. And so as a consequence, if they had malevolent intentions, we'd be no match for them. Now, while this argument seems reasonable, upon further reflection, I believe such fears are greatly overstated for a straightforward reason related to the physics of interstellar travel. Practical interstellar travel would only be viable for very advanced civilizations that have learned how to harness enormous amounts of energy. In order for an alien civilization to conduct interstellar travel, most likely it would have to obtain at least Type 1 status on the Kardashev scale, as discussed earlier. So why would aliens visit the Earth? Would an alien civilization make the long trip to plunder our resources? This is a recurrent theme in science fiction. For instance, the blockbuster 1996 film, Independence Day. It depicted a large-scale attack on Earth by aliens who travel from planet to planet in order to harvest their resources. Upon closer examination, though, this scenario seems unlikely. To me, it does not seem plausible that an alien civilization would come all the way to Earth for energy products or other natural resources. It's a safe bet that any civilization capable of traveling such long distances would not be using oil and other pre-Type 1 civilization energy sources. What is more, the transportation costs to bring the energy products or minerals back to the mother planet would not be economical. Now, conceivably, territorial motives could inform interstellar colonization, as depicted, for example, in H.G. Wells' classic novel, The War of the Worlds. In that scenario, Martians invaded Earth to take over the planet. Perhaps an alien civilization might want to colonize so-called Goldilocks planets. That is to say, planets that fall within a star's habitable zone. They would be roughly in size of the planet Earth so that they could have an atmosphere. Such prime real estate, so the argument goes, would be highly coveted by aliens. But rather than travel to Earth and subdue humans, it would probably be more feasible for an advanced alien civilization to artificially create the conditions supportable of life on a much closer planet. So from the perspective of an alien civilization, plundering the Earth for its resources would be neither practical nor desirable. So why would aliens visit us? Well, in a word, curiosity. Presumably, members of an alien civilization capable of reaching Earth would be highly curious, a quality that would be necessary to practice the science that led to their advanced technological development. So one reason they might visit Earth is to practice a form of cosmological anthropology. But because the Milky Way galaxy is so vast, containing billions of planets and stars, even if advanced aliens are out there, they might never get around to visiting our planet. So in order to initiate first contact, we may have to venture out into the cosmos. But before venturing outside of our solar system, we will first have to master interplanetary travel. New hope for reaching Mars came in 2012 when a Dutch entrepreneur, Bas Landorp, announced his intention to begin establishing a human colony on the Red Planet in 2023. According to his plan, christened Mars 1, the pioneers will fly a one-way trip to Mars, where they will begin building a permanent settlement. Then after that, every 2 years, a new set of 4 astronauts would join them. But in order to escape our solar system, we will first need to develop advanced vehicles for exploration. On that note, back in 1994, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory hosted a workshop that mulled over the prospect of faster-than-light space travel. Among the approaches considered were using cosmic wormholes and manipulating the fabric of space and time. Now, theoretically, one could use large amounts of energy to stretch space and time. In planning for this future, a theoretical physicist in Mexico, Miguel Alcubierre, he advanced the concept of using a warp drive to get around Einstein's speed of light barrier. Using the Alcubierre drive, a spacecraft could ride on an expanding fabric of space-time, not unlike a surfer riding a wave. Another way to avoid the problem of the speed of light, the cosmic speed limit, would be to use a wormhole as a shortcut across space and time. A functioning wormhole could serve as a bridge between two differing regions of the universe. Another theoretical physicist by the name of Kip Thorne, he once theorized that traversable wormholes could be created by using dark energy. When thinking about interstellar travel, the human component must be considered as well. A mission to Mars and beyond will really test the physical and mental endurance of the astronauts. For extremely long flights, the time elapsed on a spaceship could still exceed a human lifetime. So one way out of this conundrum would be for whole communities to travel together in space in self-sustaining vessels. Perhaps one day giant self-contained generation ships might be used to travel across the galaxy. Theoretically, the ship could last indefinitely because it would be equipped with renewable supplies. Now, at the present time, our technology is not advanced enough to realistically plan a course of interstellar migration. One somber explanation for the Fermi paradox would be that interstellar travel is impossible. The Fermi paradox is named after the late atomic physicist Enrico Fermi. Back in 1950, he reasoned that if advanced civilizations were common in the universe, and assuming that many of them had preceded Earth, perhaps by millions of years, then it would seem to follow that we should have been visited by now. The so-called Fermi paradox suggests that advanced civilizations are not common in our galaxy, or that they lack the technology to make contact with one another. If there is no way to break the speed of light barrier, interstellar travel will be impractical because of the long periods of time necessary to traverse such vast distances. So interstellar travel is an enormously ambitious undertaking that will require tremendous effort, intelligence, resources, and time. And it's this last requirement, time, that is most critical for the survival of our species and the likelihood that we will ever establish contact with an alien civilization. Now, the discovery of more and more Earth-like exoplanets raises the prospect that we will someday make contact with alien intelligence. Life emerged on Earth relatively quickly, which suggests that biology is merely a function of the right chemistry. Fossil evidence suggests that simple organisms came into being roughly a mere 500 million years after the Earth was formed. And so that fact would seem to augur well for the existence of intelligent life elsewhere in the cosmos. But the progression to advanced life is far from certain, for it would take another 3 billion years for multicellular life to emerge. Moreover, on a geological scale, intelligent life in the form of Homo sapiens is a recent development, and civilizations are of even more recent vintage. So by geological standards, there is really not much time for intelligent life to develop, survive, and build enduring civilizations capable of communicating with one another. So the quest to make contact with alien life is a race against time. Although our planet may seem relatively tranquil, there are numerous perils, both natural and man-made, that could eradicate humans on Earth. For instance, there's the threat posed by the roughly 200 known asteroids whose paths take them near Earth. Sooner or later, some are bound to strike Earth with possibly devastating consequences. The good news is that we might someday develop the capacity to deflect dangerous asteroids. An optimistic figure sets our sun's remaining life at roughly 5 billion more years. However, a star is not an adequate incubator of life throughout its existence. As the sun grows older and brighter, its habitable zone will shift farther and farther out from the center of the solar system. So someday, the Earth's oceans will boil away and the atmosphere will evaporate. A conservative estimate is that the Earth will be uninhabitable within 1 billion years. As mentioned earlier, fossil evidence indicates that life existed on Earth as far back as nearly 4 billion years ago. Assuming that the Earth will remain habitable for another 1 billion years, this means that life has about a 5 billion year tendency on this planet. And to date, life has used up around 80% of this time. The remaining 20% will determine if intelligent life will develop the capabilities to become immortal. In addition to natural calamities, the human race will also have to overcome social and political obstacles. Initially, hopes were raised at the end of the Cold War that the world would enter a period of unprecedented tranquility. Francis Fukuyama's 1989 article, The End of History, presaged the coming zeitgeist. According to his analysis, grand ideological conflicts, the kind that brought so much destruction in the 20th century, would disappear. And to a certain extent, empirical evidence seemed to bear that prediction out. According to many indices, as Steven Pinker noted in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, the world is actually becoming a safer place. More and more nations and governments reject the appropriateness of waging war. But still, conflict has not completely disappeared. In fact, some trends in global politics could actually reverse the peace trend. As the human population continues to rise, the world is becoming a more crowded place. In 2015, the world's population was estimated to be 7.3 billion, but that figure is projected to reach close to 10 billion by mid-century. Rapidly growing countries with a high proportion of young people are especially prone to civil unrest and are less able to create and maintain democratic institutions. As Michael T. Clare noted, a number of factors could raise the specter of resource competition on a global scale. Faced with increasing populations, governments will be strapped with huge burdens to meet the day-to-day necessities of their constituents. And so as a consequence, there will be fewer resources for grand projects, such as planning for interstellar travel. So by the early 1990s, other voices began to express a less optimistic view of the process of globalization. For example, in 1993, Samuel Huntington introduced his Clash of Civilizations model of international relations. Huntington warned of possible civilizational conflicts of truly apocalyptic proportions. So it appears that the human race is at a critical juncture in its history. The theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, he believes that the existence of life is practically a certainty, yet he finds it puzzling that despite over 50 years of effort, the SETI project has not detected any signs of alien intelligence in the universe. Using the Kardashev scale as his framework, he argues that the transition from a Type 0 to a Type 1 civilization carries a strong risk of self-destruction. So consequently, a short-lived civilization would be unlikely to establish contact. Perhaps he wonders that the galaxy could be riddled with planets that never made that perilous transition from a Type 0 to a Type 1 civilization. As Kaku explains, human nature has not really changed that much in the past 100,000 years, except that we now have nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons to settle old scores. But if we can navigate through these perils, he predicts that we will attain Type 1 civilizational status in roughly 100 years. And from there, he's confident that we can someday reach Type 2 and Type 3 status and, in effect, become immortal. Moreover, if intelligent life is able to transcend, survival would be greatly enhanced. As mentioned earlier, according to Ray Kurzweil, somewhere around the year 2045, humans will begin entering a post-biological era. If that is the case, then this post-biological intelligence would no longer require a habitable planet. It could survive anywhere in the cosmos where computers could operate. Now, if we are indeed alone in the universe, that makes the UN mission all the more vital. If humans become extinct, it's unlikely that another species could evolve and take over the reins of civilization. And this is because during man's tenure as master of the planet, he has depleted natural resources that took eons to develop. As Fred Hoyle once noted, even if some advanced species were to emerge on Earth after humans, it would not have the necessary raw materials to rebuild a civilization. So consequently, there would be no second chances for intelligent life on the planet. Now, if our civilization survives, it's reasonable to assume that our technology will continue to advance. In the near future, a concatenation of new technologies and scientific discoveries, including nanotechnology, quantum computing, fusion, and string theory, implies that progress will proceed very rapidly, exponentially rather than linearly. And so with these capabilities, we might someday be ready to journey outside of our solar system and actually come face to face with civilizations beyond Earth. But to reach that threshold, our species must surmount the difficult problems that lie ahead in this century. Among other things, overpopulation, global warming, resource depletion, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and ethnic and sectarian conflict. In the event of a major civilizational setback, there may not be adequate time and resources to recover. So we really only have a limited window of opportunity. But collectively, as a civilization, if we can navigate through our current problems, then someday we may develop the capacity for ambitious projects, including interstellar travel and exotic ways to harness enormous amounts of energy. And by doing so, we can reach our cosmic destiny of colonizing the universe, either alone or with the help of extraterrestrial intelligence. That's all I have. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them as best I can. Yes, sir.
I think at some point you and I probably should have a long conversation about some of these things, but I just have two comments at this time. One is I like your thought that we don't have to worry if, say, a Type 2 civilization shows up, that they're going to steal our oil or our coal or our iron, but they might come for our sun.
Okay.
Yeah, just thinking, maybe enclosing it in the Dyson sphere at half an AU. So that would necessarily be good for us.
Okay, Dyson sphere. Dyson sphere is named after physicist Freeman Dyson. He conjectured that very advanced civilizations, Type 2 and Type 3 civilizations, could build this big gargantuan apparatus around a star in order to collect its power. So conceivably another civilization might want our sun, but I think there are many, many other stars out there in the galaxy, some of which quite a few of which are bigger than our sun, which is around medium in size. So there will be a lot of them out there, and they might even be able to extract energy from black holes. So I think they would find more desirable stars before they would get to our solar system.
But they might eventually get to ours.
They could eventually get to ours. And there are some scientists that argue that maybe advanced civilizations may not be voracious consumers of energy. They might be actually more efficient in the way they consume energy. So
I'm just very skeptical of any assumptions either way about how the encounter is going to go.
Yeah, it is very speculative, and so it's just something we'll have to wait and see.
My other comment is that I think you should be a good bit more skeptical about at least a fair number of the ancient alien and UFOs you mentioned. I'll just mention one of them, the Harvard psychologist John Mack and all of the alien abductees he interviewed. His population of interviewees was infiltrated by somebody who just made it all up and fooled him completely. And when she revealed that publicly, he expressed doubts that she was really faking. And I think that by itself says something about the quality of Mack's work on that.
Yeah, well, I can't really comment too much on John Mack. I know a lot of people remain very skeptical about UFOs, hard scientists in particular. But there could be something out of it. There are a notable number of seemingly credible eyewitnesses who've come forward. Someone by the name of Leslie Kean, an investigative journalist, she wrote a good book about 5 years ago about UFOs and people who have gone on the record. I know I'll concede that the abduction cases are even far more controversial. Yeah, that's something that does require a considerable degree of skepticism. And of course, the burden of proof is on those people who would make those claims.
Perhaps now that nearly all Americans have a camera with them all the time, why is YouTube not exploding with videos of very high quality alien spacecraft?
Yeah, well, YouTube is full of videos, but yeah, the quality, the quality really is very good. I'll concede that. Okay. Yes, sir.
How do you personally try to reconcile the Drake equation and whatever numbers you put into the Drake equation and the Fermi paradox? And in particular, if there are any type 2 or type 3 civilizations out there within easy reach of our telescopes, shouldn't they be fairly detectable?
Yeah, in fact, there was a recent study that just came out about a week or so ago. Somebody, an astronomer, actually looked at distant galaxies to see if there was the heat generated, but something that could provide evidence for a type 3 civilization, but he did not get the results, anything that even suggested that there was anything remotely resembling a Dyson spheres in the distant galaxies. And so, yeah, I'm not really quite sure. It's something very speculative. Things like the type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations, this notion of a Dyson sphere, very speculative. And there could be other ways to extract energy. They might be more efficient at extracting that energy, and so that might be one reason why they've eluded our detection.
On the Fermi paradox and the Drake equation?
Oh, the Fermi, okay, the Fermi paradox, my own thoughts on that. One of the reasons why, if the UFO stories are not correct, why we haven't been visited, could come down to really two things. One would be that interstellar travel is impossible, and so it would be very difficult for civilizations to make contact with one another. Another reason is, generally speaking, the universe really isn't that old. It sounds very old, 13.7 billion years old, but really it would take a while for the stars to develop that were capable of hosting life. For example, the heavy elements are created in the supernova explosion, and it really, so the first generation of stars could not have hosted life. And so it really would have taken quite some time for the heavy elements to be diffused throughout the galaxy so that they would be available to be the building blocks of life. And so that would be one reason way I could reconcile the Fermi paradox with the Drake equation. Yes?
So I think I had two comments, really. One, that it certainly is correct that the planet has had life for about 4 billion years. However, the timing on evolution is very long, meaning that we only actually got eukaryotes, took another 500 million years to develop, and you didn't have metazoan, which is multi-cell organisms, until 2 billion years ago. So that took another large chunk of time. So if someone is going to be able to do interstellar travel, chances are they're going to get to a place that is habitable. That's fine, but the chances of finding intelligent life are very slim, because you have to allow for large spans of time to reach evolution that can then develop into intelligent organisms that can use tools and whatnot.
Yeah, there might be some planets that originally hosted life, but the life could be eradicated before it ever reached that milestone where it was intelligent life. And so, yes, just to recapitulate some of the things earlier, I think the prospects of coming into contact with alien civilizations is really a race against time. Some astrobiologists think that Mars might have hosted life, but it probably never got beyond the single cellular organisms, or at least very rudimentary multicellular organisms. And so it never really had time to evolve and to develop into advanced intelligent life that would be capable of contemplating a lot of these issues that we're discussing this evening.
And I wanted to follow that. So not only is it unlikely to find life, but let's say even if there isn't life, I think one of the most striking points on this presentation is this cosmic destiny at the end. Regardless if there's anything else out there, what we have to face is the reality of the finite time we have in our planet. Mm-hmm. And what are we doing with our time? How are we going to learn to get along as a civilization? Are we going to be able to start trying to kill each other and perhaps face the reality that it might not be in our lifetimes, but if we're to survive many generations down the line, are we going to get it together so that we can travel and find a new home, which is what it will eventually take. If we're to survive for a long time, eventually we will need that new home. So that's really what people need to think about. And it's a hard thing to think about because it's not going to affect you and I personally, but it will affect our intelligent civilization if it's to survive the long run.
Yeah, so I agree with all of your analysis. Yes, I think so. We only have really a limited window of opportunity. But yeah, it's really imperative if we are going to survive, eventually we're going to have to venture outside of our planet. Yes, sir, all the way up there.
You talked about Baz Landor. Do you know if they're still trying to work on that project where they're trying to colonize other planets?
Well, he just wants to colonize Mars, for starters. Last I heard a few months ago, yeah. In fact, the project had gone through a pool of applicants, received thousands of applications. He hoped to raise money for the project by having a reality show, and the profits would be used to underwrite that mission. Of course, it's an enormously ambitious project. I wish him the best of luck, but I'm very skeptical about it. But to the best of my knowledge, yes, he still continues to move forward with Mars 1. Yes, sir.
You had a lot of information on how our own government has reacted to UFOs and so forth, but how has the rest of the world's governments reacted to it?
England had an office, for example, that investigated UFOs. Nick Pope held that position. The French government and the Belgian government took the issue quite seriously around 20, 25 years or so. Around 1989 and 1990, there was a big UFO wave in Belgium and then around France. And there was a private think tank in France called Cometa. That was the acronym. It issued a report which actually thought that the UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin. It was a very controversial report. Some people said that they jumped to conclusions, but other governments, including the Brazilian government, has taken it seriously. So there are a limited number of governments that have taken it seriously, but generally speaking, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of effort on part of governments around the world at this time. Okay, thank you, folks.